What happens when a man who has spent more than 7 decades staring down outlaws, killers, and death itself on screen suddenly finds himself face to face with a talk show host who believes political disagreement justifies open disrespect? What unfolded next became one of the most tense and unforgettable moments ever captured on daytime television. This was the moment Clint Eastwood, the man who defined toughness in American cinema, calmly reminded everyone that even at 94 years old, he does not suffer fools lightly. The studio fell completely silent. The audience stopped breathing. And Behar realized that some men have faced far scarier things than aggressive questions at a talk show table. Before we get into this moment, make sure you subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments, because this exchange had people arguing for weeks. That morning at The View carried a strange, electric energy. Clint Eastwood was scheduled to appear, and everyone inside the studio sensed this interview wouldn't be like the others. At 94, Clint wasn't just another celebrity guest. He was a living legend, a man who had evolved from a television cowboy to a global movie star, then into an Oscar-winning director. Few figures in Hollywood history had earned respect across generations, cultures, and political divides the way he had. But behind the scenes, there was tension. Behar had never let go of Clint's 2012 Republican National Convention appearance, the infamous empty chair speech that instantly became political history. To her, it symbolized everything she felt Hollywood should reject. And today, she was ready to challenge him. As the cameras rolled, Clint took his seat slowly and deliberately. No rush, no nerves. The audience immediately rose to their feet in a long-standing ovation. Clint acknowledged it with a brief nod, that familiar squint still sharp in his eyes. Whoopi Goldberg opened the segment with clear admiration. Our next guest is a true icon. 7 decades in entertainment, 4 Academy Awards, and countless roles that shaped American cinema. Please welcome Clint Eastwood. Thank you, Clint said. It's good to be here. His voice was softer than it had been in his Dirty Harry days, but it still carried that unmistakable gravel, the sound of a man who never wasted words. The interview began smoothly. Clint spoke about his latest film, his love for storytelling, and why retirement had never appealed to him. I like to work, he said simply. The day you stop working is usually the day you start fatting. I've seen it happen too many times. The audience responded warmly. This was the Clint Eastwood they came to see. Then the mood shifted. Behar leaned forward, her tone noticeably sharper. So Clint, she said, people still remember that 2012 convention speech, the empty chair. Looking back, don't you feel embarrassed? Don't you think that was the most awkward moment of your career? The room tightened instantly. Clint didn't flinch. No, he said calmly, I don't. A murmur moved through the audience. Joy pressed on. People said you'd lost touch, that it was sad to watch. People say a lot of things, Clint replied evenly. Doesn't mean they're right. He paused, completely unbothered. I was making a point about politics and promises. Some people understood it. Some didn't. I wasn't trying to please anyone who had already decided they didn't like me. Joy frowned. But didn't it hurt your legacy? Clint leaned back slightly, a faint smile crossing his face. I've been in this business for over 70 years, he said. I've been criticized my entire life. I served my country. I've made over 60 films. I've directed movies that won Academy Awards. I've given work to thousands of people. That's my legacy. One speech doesn't change that. The studio was completely silent. Joy tried once more. Many people in Hollywood strongly oppose your political views. Clint met her gaze without hesitation. I didn't build my career by following crowds, he said quietly. I built it by thinking for myself. Don't you feel like you've betrayed your industry? The question revealed far more about Joy's mindset than she probably realized. Clint's eyes narrowed just slightly. When he answered, his voice carried a sharper edge than before. Betrayed my industry, he repeated calmly. I've been making films since 1955. I've created opportunities for hundreds of actors, writers, and directors. I've kept crews employed for decades. I've made movies that earned billions worldwide. He paused, locking eyes with Joy in a way that made her shift uncomfortably in her seat. What I haven't given this industry is my independence of thought, and I'm not about to start now. I think for myself, always have. If that bothers some people in Hollywood, that's their issue, not mine. Joy tried to regain control, but the things the Republican Party stands for. The interruption landed with surgical precision. A few audience members actually applauded before catching themselves. Joy's face flushed. That's not fair, Clint. There's a difference between free speech and hate speech, between opinion and misinformation. Is there? Clint asked quietly, his voice carrying effortlessly through the studio. And who decides the difference? You. People who agree with you. Seems to me the definition changes depending on who's speaking. Joy was visibly frustrated now. Her attempt to corner him was unraveling fast. Let's talk about your films then, she said, switching tactics. Many critics say your work glorifies violence, promotes toxic masculinity. Dirty Harry was even accused of being fascist propaganda. Don't you feel responsible for America's culture of violence? Clint studied her for a long moment. Dirty Harry was a movie about a cop trying to stop a serial killer while bureaucracy got in the way, he said evenly. It came out in 1971. You're blaming me for violence in America because of a film I made over 50 years ago. He shook his head slowly. I've also made films about the cost of violence. Unforgiven was about a man destroyed by the life he lived. $1 Million Baby was about broken dreams and irreversible choices. Letters from Iwo Jima showed war from the perspective of our enemies, to remind people they were human too. He looked directly at her. But those don't fit the story you want to tell, do they? The accuracy of the critique hit hard. Joy had cherry-picked his most controversial work while ignoring the films that complicated her argument. I'm just saying your films reflect a certain perspective, she replied defensively. One many people find problematic. Problematic, Clint repeated, as if the word tasted bad. That's one of those words that means whatever the speaker wants it to mean. My films have a perspective, yes, my perspective. I'm the director. That's how it works. If you want films with your perspective, go make them yourself. The audience laughed. Joy's embarrassment was obvious. You know what I find interesting, Joy? Clint continued, his voice calm but now edged with steel. You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to put me in a box, trying to get me to apologize for my politics, my movies, my opinions. But you haven't asked a single question about filmmaking, about craft, about what I've learned in 70 years, about why I'm still doing this at 94. He paused. You're not interested in that. You just want me to say, I'm sorry for not thinking the way you think I should. The comment stripped away any remaining pretense of journalism. I'm asking what our viewers want to know, Joy said, but her voice lacked confidence. Are you? Clint raised an eyebrow slightly. Or are you asking what you want answered? I've done a lot of interviews in my life. Most journalists want to talk about the work. You seem interested in something else. Joy tried again. I'm interested in accountability. You're a public figure with influence. Don't you have a responsibility to use it in ways that help, not harm? I make movies that entertain and sometimes make people think, Clint replied. That helps. I employ people and treat them fairly. That helps. I served my country when I was young and paid my taxes every year since. That helps. He leaned forward slightly, his presence suddenly filling the table. What I don't do is tell people how to think, how to vote, or how to live. That's not my job, and it's not anyone else's, no matter how righteous they believe themselves to be. Joy was running out of angles, but she pushed once more. But Clint, the party you support has backed policies many believe hurt women, minorities, and the environment. How can you align with that? Clint was silent for a beat. When he spoke, his voice was softer and somehow more powerful. Joy, I've worked with more women and minorities than most people in this business. I've given opportunities to people who couldn't get them anywhere else. I judge people by their work, not their skin color or anything else. That's how I was raised. That's how I live. He paused, unwavering. As for the environment, I drive an electric car. I have solar panels on my house, but I don't lecture others about their choices. I assume they're adults who can decide for themselves. He gave a faint smile. Seems like that, becoming a pretty radical idea these days. The audience laughed again. Joy's frustration finally spilled over. You can joke, Clint, but these are serious issues. People are suffering because of policies your party supports. Clint's expression hardened. My party, he said firmly. I'm a libertarian, Joy. I believe in individual freedom and limited government. I believe people should be allowed to live their lives without politicians or TV hosts telling them how. If that makes me the villain in your eyes, I can live with that. He straightened in his chair, and despite his age, his presence was unmistakably formidable. Since you mentioned suffering, he added quietly, let me tell you something. I grew up during the Great Depression. My family had nothing. My father moved us wherever he could find work. Moving across California wherever work was available. I know what hunger feels like. I know fear. I know what it's like not knowing where your next meal will come from. His voice carried the weight of lived experience, not theory, not slogans. I built everything I have through work, real work, over decades. Nobody handed me anything, and when I finally had something to give, I used it to create opportunities for others. He paused. That's my philosophy. Work hard, treat people fairly, mind your own business. It's not complicated. Joy made one last attempt. But don't you see how that pull yourself up by your bootstraps mindset ignores systemic inequality? Not everyone starts with the same opportunities you did. Clint looked at her for a long moment. I was a poor kid from Oakland, he said evenly. My father dug swimming pools for a living. What opportunities do you think I had? I made my opportunities. That's what people do when they want something badly enough. He shook his head slowly. You know what I think the real problem is, Joy? Somewhere along the way, people decided that disagreement equals hate. That if someone thinks differently, they must be a bad person. That's not how a free country works, and it's not how adults should treat each other. The words cut straight to the heart of the confrontation. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Clint wasn't finished. I've lived long enough to see this country change. Some changes were good, some were. But the worst change, this idea that you can't respect someone you disagree with. That kind of thinking is dangerous. That's how societies tear themselves apart. The studio was completely silent now. Clint's voice carried the authority of someone who had lived through history, not just watched it on a screen. You came at me with hostility today, Joy. You questioned my politics, my movies, my character. And that's your right, that's free speech. Then he leaned slightly forward. But here's what I want to say to you, and to everyone watching. He turned and looked directly into the camera, holding the gaze of millions. I don't hate you for disagreeing with me. I don't think you're a bad person because you see the world differently. I think you're wrong about some things, just like you think I'm wrong. And that's okay. That's what freedom actually looks like. He turned back to Joy. I've directed around 40 films. Some leaned conservative, some leaned liberal. Most were just stories about people trying to figure life out. I've never made movies to push agendas. I made them to entertain, to move people, to make them feel something. That's an artist's job. Slowly, deliberately, Clint stood up. I came here to talk about my new film, maybe share stories from 70 years in this business. Instead, I was interrogated about my politics, like I was on trial for wrongthink. He gave a small shrug. That's fine. I've faced tougher crowds than this. That famous squint returned, and for a moment, everyone saw the man who stared down outlaws in dusty deserts, who told punks to make his day, who earned respect without ever asking for it. And I'll tell you something, Joy, he said calmly. The reason I'm still here at 94, still working, still relevant, is because I never cared what people thought of me. I did the work, I trusted the audience, I stayed true to myself. That's the only advice I have, in this business or any other. Do the work, be yourself, let the chips fall where they may. He nodded toward Whoopi. Thanks for having me, I appreciate it. And with the same unhurried calm that defined the entire interview, Clint Eastwood walked off the stage. The studio exploded. Applause thundered through the room. Some people stood, others cheered. Joy Behar remained seated, somehow smaller than she had been at the start, like someone who brought a knife to a gunfight and only realized it when the smoke cleared. What began as an attempted takedown became something else entirely. A masterclass in dignity under pressure. A lesson in real confidence. A reminder that true strength doesn't shout. And as the studio settled into stunned silence, one thing was undeniable. Clint Eastwood walked in a legend, and walked out reminding everyone exactly why. Not with anger, not with insults, but with the quiet certainty of a man who knows exactly who he is, and doesn't need permission to remain that way. The aftermath dominated conversations for weeks. Clips of Clint's calm, devastating responses spread across social media by the millions. Opinion pieces followed. Debates raged. Some praised Joy for asking hard questions. Many more pointed out the difference between tough journalism and hostile interrogation. But the lasting impact was simpler and rarer. In an age fueled by outrage, Clint Eastwood proved dignity still works. That disagreement doesn't require disrespect. That real power comes from being so grounded that attacks simply don't land. At 94 years old, Clint Eastwood delivered a masterclass in something increasingly uncommon. Being an adult. What do you think? Was Joy Behar out of line, or just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that leave people speechless.